Hello friends, welcome back to the bench. Thank you very much for joining me. Our patient is a Mazda b2600 ECM. Now this is what we specialize in. Well, one of the ECMs that we specialize in. And these suffer from a leaky caps. As you can see, this one has not too much damage. Typically on these, this plane is completely gone, and it looks like yeah, I think we still need to restore it. I just gave it a quick visual when I received it, and I quoted the customer, so we'll see if my quote was accurate. If not, we're still not going to change it. These two resistors are responsible for injection, and that's what the problem is on this car. It runs better when it warms up, because once you start conducting once it warms up, when you start conducting current through these through this leak, right? Then yeah, it kind of starts working again. But as you can see, there looks like some traces missing. This might be harder than I thought. Because I don't know if there was a trace over here, so that's going to be tricky. We'll see on the other side. And what about these? Because I didn't know if we're going to have to be restoring the traces over here, but looks like it should be fine. These traces should be fine. Yeah, this should be good. So we need to restore this trace. We need to restore this via over here. That's typical. Now looks like our diode over here is fine. There's a little corrosion here, so we'll test that. And what about this transistor? No, that's a diode. That's two diodes, right? This is a different version. On the one I did last time, I thought there was a big diode over here, the through-hole diode. I think somewhere here, and the vias usually just completely disintegrate, they oxidize, and then just copper disappears. Because basically, if you're into gold recovery, you know what happens here, right? We're mixing electrolyte from the capacitor. This one will leak. We're mixing it with an electricity, basically, with current flow, and that produces copper chloride, and that dissolves copper. It oxidizes copper. That's why it turns green. That's why we have greenish tint over here, which I usually call blue, but it's actually green. The copper turns green when it oxidizes. But it's also kind of greenish bluish, so I usually call it blue, but yeah, technically it's green. But that's what happens on these. I usually say, if you buy this truck used, first thing that you gotta do is open the ECM and see the extent of damage, because normally what you will expect is, if it runs rough, or especially idling rough, first you're gonna reach into the injectors, the ignition coils, maybe check compression, maybe head gasket, maybe the O2 sensors and that kind of stuff, which is good, but not on these. On these, it's gonna be always an ECM. If you have any problems with this truck, it's always going to be an ECM because of this faulty cap. It's, well, faulty. It worked for many years, right? These are like 92, 93, up to like 94, I think. Maybe not including 94, I don't remember. They started making them differently after that. But anywhere from 90 to 93, these are really good trucks. And they all, since it's been quite a few years, this cap is just not rated for that long. I also replaced this one, but as we can see, this one is fine. there's even a little more bluish over here. Yeah, and the copper is has been eaten over here. We still have original conformal coating. Look at that. So this was new. The customer actually bought this truck new and had it all these years. That's why he wants it repaired. Now, if the scope of the damage is too wide, you can always replace the entire ECM unit. It's a little pricey, but it doesn't need to be programmed. That's why it's pricey. Usually ECMs that don't need to be programmed are usually 3 times more expensive than the ones that do need to be programmed. All right, so first thing that I'm gonna do is obviously disassemble it. Then I'm gonna throw it in the ultrasonic cleaner to get rid of all of this. I know where the damage is now, so I don't need the visual cues. But first, let's look underneath the board. And typically, underneath the board is usually fine. It's only the top of the board that suffers from this. But once underneath, that's why this was caught relatively early. That's why it's cheaper. Sometimes when you just ignore those symptoms and just keep running, because technically the truck will run, it'll just run a little rough or maybe misfire from time to time, but overall it'll be working. If you ignore those symptoms, then that copper underneath the cap is going to completely dissolve, and the electrolyte will start leaking to the other side of the board, and that makes it even worse. And there's pretty much no cap on this repair, right? I usually say that the repair is typically around anywhere from $50 to maybe $220, $250, but it all depends. Sometimes the damage is so wide that it takes hours to resolve, which obviously is going to be more expensive than $50, right? And it doesn't want to let loose. Let's get a spudger and come on. Didn't want to let loose. And now let's see the other side, but based on what I see on the top side, I don't expect any problems at the bottom. And yeah, it looks good. It looks pretty good. I don't see any signs. Let's see underneath the cap. This is the cap. Which one's this one? Yeah, this is the cap. Right, no sign of damage. So it's only one-sided problem. So that makes it easy. Again, the earlier you catch it, the less expensive the repair is. The more you drive on this issue, the worse it'll be. All right, let's clean it up and let's get this fixed. car done. That was not too bad, although it took a lot longer than I thought, because did you notice on the footage, perhaps you haven't because it was sped up, but once so the connection was there before I cleaned it. Then I cleaned it and the connection wasn't there. So that means, because I was scraping it, right? I was grinding it. So there must have been like a tiniest amount of copper that was actually making the connection. That's why it did work and worked better when it was warm. And it was on its last leg. Definitely, it would have the car would have died eventually and just not start. Probably mainly due to lack of injection. What was it? 2 vias, 2 traces. It was not bad. We've seen a lot worse than this. But this is it. The car should be running smoothly now. Thank you very much for your business. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I shall see you in the next one.